Oh, there it is. I see it. We're live. We're live.
We are live, Doug. You are incorrect. After the overrun of NXT, it's the Two Bros Wrestling Show on a Tuesday evening.
Tuesday Two Bros. Maybe we should just keep doing Tuesdays. It kind of has a ring to it. Tuesdays Two Bros.
Tuesdays, Two Bros on YouTube.
On
Because
YouTube.
here in March, we've moved to YouTube. If you're watching this live on YouTube, feel free to chime in and let us know what you think as we go along. Join the conversation. If you're watching us on the next day airing here on Facebook, let us know in the comments what you think, because tonight, Doug, we are in the midst of a string of WrestleMania themed shows. So tonight we're going to kick that off by talking WrestleMania's best and worst through the years, and that is our main event topic.
Yes, it is. There it is.
But before we do that, obviously, we always start with the opening bell and the news for the week. Obviously, the top story this week is the loss of a legend, but I want to kind of end on that so that we can have a little bit of time to reflect on the career of Scott Hall. So, Doug, I'm going to start instead with other big news this week, and that is a very serious injury this past Friday night that will unfortunately keep Big E away from WrestleMania and any WrestleMania plans. Big E suffered a serious neck injury during a very scary spot live on television. He broke his neck during a tag team outing when Ridge Holland gave him a belly-to-belly suplex on the floor, and he landed on his head. He didn't do a full torque. There is no malice or intent or hard feelings, it seems, on Ridge. Nothing was... I'd say nothing was wrong other than maybe the wisdom of WWE officials booking that kind of spot on a concrete floor.
Yeah, I've heard there's no heat on Holland, and Big E seems in incredibly good spirits. However, did you catch this news story that's been making the rounds today that said this could potentially be the end of Big E's in-ring career?
Yes.
Because of the damage sustained, not necessarily the damage, but where it was sustained. I guess the C1 is an incredibly vulnerable area, and even with just a fracture where there's no spinal damage, that it potentially will not heal completely and could be a very damaging in the future if something were to happen. So it sounds, at least from one medical expert who hasn't, I think we should go out of the way to say that this medical expert hadn't reviewed any of the X-rays, hasn't read the charts or anything, just speculating based on what information is out there, that it could be a in-ring career ender for Big E, which I hope is not the case.
I certainly hope it's not the case, especially on a spot that didn't need to happen on a SmackDown match that was just building up a feud. It just wasn't necessary, honestly, to be doing that spot on the floor. So if there's blame anywhere, it really is in the booking of that spot to begin with. I guess bright side that we could say is that Big E can feel his extremities, so they don't appear to be any spinal damage. So he very easily could have been paralyzed on that spot. It was extremely scary looking when it happened. So it was awful. And so let's hope it's not the end of his career, because we don't personally know these performers, but there is not a thing that you will read that doesn't, almost to a person, say that Big E is genuinely one of the greatest men behind the scenes at WWE. He is beloved, and there was an outpouring. With this incident, there was an outpouring. There was an outpouring of affection and appreciation when he was given the world title earlier this year. So I think Big E has definitely got all of the wrestling world in his corner, and I wouldn't count the man out.
Absolutely not. And again, the injury that's sustained, it sounds like one of those things when that C1 is fractured or breaks, it often leads to paralysis or death, which is terrifying. And that spot looks just so terrifying. But again, no malice, no ill will, no heat on Holland. It's being treated one of those as accidents happen, which truly they do.
Holland apparently handled himself really well after the fact, saying all the right things and showing concern, and Big E was obviously quick to let him know that he did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Always the professional, Big E. Get
Absolutely.
well and return, my friend.
Absolutely. Living the gimmick there, the power of positivity.
That's the truth. Doug, we're going to pivot here to a follow-up really on the last week of the big news from the previous week, and that's just a little more information we have now than that we didn't have at the time. Reporting on ROH being purchased by Tony Khan and ran
Hi,
as
Tony.
a company.
Hi.
That's right. So some things that have come to light since that episode that we now know is that Tony Khan does intend to run Ring of Honor as a separate company. He also plans to be the full-time booker, which may give some concern to AEW fans in just that a man who was already stretched a little thin since he took on pretty much all the responsibilities at AEW is now planning on doing the same for a second promotion. There is no current distribution, so that's something that still needs to be worked out. And that the Honor Club platform, the fate of it is still in limbo. As it sits right now, there are still 12 Ring of Honor employees, all pretty much on the back end production side, that are expected to be let go later on in April, probably late April. There has been no decision made on that yet. There's some indication that perhaps they could take other jobs within Sinclair, the former owners of Ring of Honor, but it is really going to be April before this sale is actually finalized and that Tony really takes full ownership. And so at that time, he will decide what to do with those employees, those that may be remaining, as well as things such as Honor Club. In the meantime, however, in a bit of interesting timing is the Supercard of Honor event, which is going to take place WrestleMania weekend, which was scheduled to be the rebirth of this next era of Ring of Honor. And that is still going to happen on the 1st, but that is less than 3 weeks away, folks. And there are 2 matches that are currently booked. And from all indications, Tony is going to be on hand, even though the sale will not be finalized. And Tony will be doing the booking for the Supercard of Honor. So at this point in time, since there is literally no Ring of Honor talents that are under contract, I would very much expect that we're going to see an AEW heavy show. Surely they'll have to have an influx of AEW talent just to fill out the bill.
So, this is a slight side note, but does anybody else feel just like a little bit of an underachiever when compared to Tony Khan? Because he's booking 2 separate wrestling promotions now, and doesn't he also have his hands in 2 separate, one football, one soccer, well, soccer here in America, and American football leagues, the man needs to slow down. I do have a concern that he is spreading himself a bit too thin here by doing everything.
You got to appreciate the man's passion, but yeah, you do have to be somewhat concerned. Obviously, you have a situation like a Cody Rhodes leaving because he no longer has the same amount of control as Tony sort of intensifies his own responsibilities. And the further a person stretches himself or herself thin, I mean, there is only so much hours that each of us would have in a day that we could give our full attention to things. So that's a lot of balls to be keeping in the air when you're trying to juggle all of that.
Right. We'll see how this works out.
I do think it's in the long term, the only thing that could have potentially saved Ring of Honor. So for the sake of the company and its legacy, let's hope it works out for all involved.
Yeah, and let's face it, I think this was a play for the tape library anyway, because, All In belongs to Ring of Honor. That's in their library. So,
well, he could have probably had that library if that was all he wanted. So the fact that he is planning on running it as its own promotion, and I mean, I think that is one, shows his passion for wrestling and the product and the history and legacy of a place like Ring of Honor. And, he could have closed up shop and bought the library, did the Vince McMahon thing where you basically buy WCW to get a few contracts and own the library. That's not what he intends to do.
Unless it's all the work. Cody's coming back to run Ring of Honor. Wait, hear me out. Cody's coming back to run Ring of Honor, and Tony putting himself out there as the booker for all this, and AEW, it's a work. I'm going with that. It's all a work.
Well, I was going to save this for later in the opening bell, but since you brought up Cody Rhodes, Doug, Cody Rhodes obviously left AEW. His contract expired. It was big news. Then even bigger news that, oh my goodness, he's going back to WWE. Then there were some reports that talks had fallen through with WWE, and then not really so much reports as just rumors of fans, I think, booking, thinking that, okay, it is all a work, and now Cody Rhodes is going to lead Ring of Honor and an Invasion and all these sorts of things. Apparently, WWE still has plans for Cody Rhodes, and that's the last I heard, is the plans for Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania, but I was expecting him last night. I actually was expecting him last week. And so the closer this gets to Mania, apparently he's in line to take on Seth Rollins. Doug, what are you hearing?
I'm hearing the same things, but I want to talk about Cody later in the show too, near the end of our show.
Okay, can do.
Yeah, I'll just save it for later.
All right, we'll save that part for later. Before we get off the topic of AEW, though, obviously we had some returns and some debuts, and a lot happened over the last 2 weeks in AEW, especially at Revolution. We saw the debuts of both Shane Swerve Strickland, and then we saw the debut of William Regal. And then we also, this past week on Dynamite, probably the most newsworthy of this bunch is we got a Hardy Boys reunion. Doug, is this a good or bad thing?
You know what? Jeff Hardy is my favorite Hardy. No loss of love for Matt. Matt's great too, but Jeff's my favorite Hardy. I like the Team Extreme, or what they're not the Hardy Boys now. They go out of their way to just refer to them as the Hardy Brothers, I believe. So a lot of brother tag teams in AEW, which I'm cool with. I love tag teams, love a great stable, and apparently Tony Khan doesn't love stables anymore, or factions, because he just split a whole bunch of them up last week. But I'm seeing Jeff having a good run. We're going to get to see maybe some classic matches and elevate some more of the younger talent throughout. I think that's good for the younger talent, because I think AEW does well with their seasoned veterans, where they put them into situations where they can do what they should be doing, which is elevate the younger talent. So I think it's a good move. Of course, I'm an AEW fanboy, as everybody will comment down below anyway. I mean, hell, my name is Dynamite Doug, so have at me, guys.
I'm going to reserve judgment. I'm happy to see the Hardys back together. I think that it's exciting to see them work with some of the many tag teams that AEW has that they've never worked with before. However, how Jeff previously left his former employer does give me pause to get too excited about him being put in a situation where he's going to abuse his body again, or be tempted by some of the old demons that you will find in wrestling locker rooms and on the road. So I hope that Jeff is actually ready for this physically and mentally. He seemed in a really good spot before falling off the wagon at the very tail end of his last WWE run, which was really his last strike there. So I hope that he can keep it together.
He's got Sting there to keep him in line now. I'm really thinking, I don't know if this is accurate or not because I haven't researched it, but I'm thinking the last time Sting and Jeff were in a ring together was that fiasco that was a match back in the TNA Impact days. I'm not really sure about that, but I'm thinking that's the last time they may have been in a ring together until this last week on Dynamite with the run-in.
I know that they have made amends, and that was, had been talked about in WWE when Jeff was doing his whole sort of apology tour there about how he was a changed man right before he fell off the wagon again. So, I mean, he and Sting are at least on good terms because it was a pretty ugly incident back in the day in Impact. But yeah, it's something to watch and to be cautious about. But speaking of Impact, actually, that's a transition because my next news item is about Impact, and this is more comings and goings. This is a going. After a 5-year run with Impact, it appears that Fallah Bahh is now done with the company. His name was quietly removed from the roster list, and there is no word yet on the next career moves for Ba. And then I'll end before we talk a little bit about Scott Hall. I'll end with a couple of Hall of Fame notes. First, the Ring of Honor Hall of Fame. I know we had said that the Hall of Fame class, the initial Hall of Fame class for Ring of Honor, was complete with the 5 men who were going to be entering that first class here on April 1st. However, they have expanded it to a 6th and final inductee, and that is to Kerry Silkin, and it is a special award. It's the Legacy Award, and he is also a very deserving recipient of that. He is a former owner and operator of ROH and really helped guide them through its glory days. Actually, as the financial backer for quite a few years. He's probably the only reason that Ring of Honor survived some of those tumultuous early years, even to be bought by Sinclair to begin with. So the fact that they're even ended up being a Ring of Honor for 20 years is very much due to Kerry Silkin. So I think that was a good move to honor him in that initial class for his role in the company's history. And then finally, I'll mention that we have 2 new inductees joining Undertaker in WWE's Hall of Fame for WrestleMania weekend, and that's both Vader and Queen Sharmell. And we will not get into the merits of these individuals right now because that is going to be our next week's show. And that will allow me to pivot to the real main story of the week, and how could it not be? And that is the passing of a true wrestling icon. And yesterday we lost Scott Hall. Doug, if we had lost Scott Hall 5 years ago when we were doing this as a news story, I hate to say that no one would be surprised. But to me, the saddest part about this whole thing is that the man fought so hard to put his life back together, and then to pass away after complications from hip surgery. Had 3 heart attacks apparently over the weekend, and then passed yesterday. Doug, Scott Hall, what's Scott Hall's legacy for the history of pro wrestling?
Man, Scott Hall is an amazing performer. Yeah, Scott Hall is Scott Hall himself, not just Razor Ramon, but Scott Hall himself, an amazing character. I've always loved the charisma and chemistry that he's had with Nash because they are legit brothers in arms, just like the rest of the clique. I'm a huge mark for the clique, everybody in the clique. And, you know, that ladder match with Shawn Michaels, the first ladder match, I think that's enough said right there. But, he goes on above that, breaks away from WWE with Nash, becomes the Outsiders, and completely revolutionizes the 90s wrestling scene by creating the NWO with Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. I mean,
and honestly, it's worth noting that there was a lot of people who would cheer bad guys, but bad guys were never presented as anything but bad guys. The NWO and WCW, and then you could argue around the same time, Steve Austin and WWF at the time, but it was right in that era, and those men, Scott Hall, right in the center of it, when bad guys went from being bad guys to being cool. I mean, the bad guys were never presented as really that cool previously, and it was hard not to cheer for what the NWO was doing. And not only were they all great on the mic and all great with the gimmick, Scott was the only one that could actually wrestle. And it should be pointed out, he's the only one that could do all that and work.
So true. Yeah, great character, great performer. And he and Nash really paved the way for a lot of things that probably, unfortunately, led to the downfall of the WCW with the contracts they were able to get. But it also opened up a whole new line of contracts for other wrestlers jumping back and forth during that time. There's a lot to say there about Scott. We talked about Jeff earlier and his demons. Scott had a lot of demons and had a hard life. Like you said, 5 years ago, it would have been a very sad story, but we would have said, this is where it goes. Same with Jake the Snake, but DDP turned both these guys around and helped these guys. Yeah. And man, this one just hits different, man, because this is more right there where I think both our wrestling fandom really was hitting its stride. When we were kids.
When we were kids.
When we were kids, and the NWO, the Outsiders, Hall and Nash. Even before that, the Clique.
Did you like Razor? Were you a Razor fan with WWF?
I like Razor, but I think Scott Hall was just Razor with that scar without that Scarface gimmick. They're the two I think were really indistinguishable, other than like a worked accent.
Do you remember Scott Hall from the AWA, which was right before
You know
that?
what? I've seen video footage. I think isn't there a thing like a not a 24 hours but or not a behind the music that wow hi I'm Doug and I'm really old I'm talking about VH1 behind the music. But there's I think it's on the network. I have no idea where to find it now because Peacock hates me. But there's a Scott Hall story out there floating around somewhere. I really think it's on the network now on Peacock, where it kind of breaks down Scott's life and his early career. I mean, man,
Yeah,
dude
I
had
mean,
a
I actually remember him from the AWA before he was Razor, because I watched a little bit of AWA. It used to air in the afternoons on ESPN. But I want to share my screen here, Doug. Something that I found with my first memories of Scott Hall. Do you remember his time in Mid Atlantic?
I do not.
Okay. I know we've talked before. I'm only a year older than you, but I think that year makes a big difference when you're a kid as to the things
Uh-huh.
you actually see and remember. So there on the right, this picture was taken by a 12-year-old Kevin Compton
Oh, I love it.
in the Logan Field House in Logan, West Virginia. This is November 10th, 1984. That is manager James J. Dillon there. I am in front row. That's JJ there, leaning on the ring apron, watching his man, Black Bart, being taken to task by American Starship. And on the right, that is Starship Coyote, a 26-year-old Scott Hall. I knew I had these pictures somewhere, and I thought, man, if I could just lay my hands on them prior to tonight's show. But Scott Hall and the guy, the blonde there that's coming off the rope, that's Dan Spivey. They were American Starship, Coyote, and Eagle. They trained under Dusty Rhodes in Championship Wrestling from Florida in 1984 and 85. 84, this would have been when this shot was taken. So Scott Hall is just in the business. Dusty sent them from Florida to work for Jim Crockett to get some experience on the road. They obviously came to Logan, and I saw Scott Hall right at the very, very beginnings of his career. And this picture means a lot more. I always love these photos because I happened to be front row and got some great shots that night. I'll have to share some of those at some other time, Doug, because the main event that night in 1984, and I have some great pictures, Ricky Steamboat going for the world title against Ric Flair
Oh
on that very same night. It was amazing that this card came to Logan. But yes, Scott Hall there and is a 26-year-old. But wanted to share that tonight and
I
say, hey,
love that, and I think Starship Coyote should be like our like 80s hair metal project. Yeah, I wrote that down. We
well,
are totally doing a Starship Coyote like a hair metal project.
Starship Coyote and Starship Eagle, man. The time goes way too fast, and 63 is way too young.
Way too young.
Obviously, he's got to put his body through it. But hey, yo, and
Yo.
so long to the bad guy, and condolences to all his friends and family and fans. And Diamond Dallas, of course, has to be crushed by this. Big loss, just a big loss. And we wanted to give it an appropriate amount of time. So we're a little later getting into our main event. But Doug, let's go ahead and get into it and
Let's do it. I have
pick it
notes.
up here.
This is
Doug's
a
got
rarity. I
notes.
actually have notes. I did homework. Just a little bit, but I did homework.
We want to talk WrestleMania for the next several episodes of the Two Bros Wrestling Show, and kicking it all off by just talking about the best and worst in the history of WrestleMania. Doug, your memories of that very first WrestleMania. Do you remember the very first one?
I do not actually, because I'm thinking maybe WrestleMania came into young Doug's field of vision maybe around WrestleMania 3. It's
Yeah.
like WrestleManias that I'm aware of like 1 and 2. The original WrestleManias again is from old VHS tapes, or even later in life the network, until of course it went to Peacock because I can't find anything over there now. So, but yeah,
Well,
I
you're not
really
missing
don't.
really much. By I mean, yes, Mania one saved Vince McMahon and the WWF, and really created a blueprint for pay per view. And I mean, there's a lot that's hanging on that very first WrestleMania. What isn't there in that very first WrestleMania is a lot in the way of really great matches. There's probably
Mhm.
more moments than matches that people remember from that one. If you go back and watch it and try to find the 5-star match, you're not going to find a 4-star match. It was not necessarily a great show, and 2 was pretty awful. So 3 really was when it really started to pick up as far as big moments and work rate and classic matches. Obviously, that's really the 1 is memorable because it was the first one, but 3 is really the next one that's memorable just because it's
Mhm.
still considered one of the best manias
Yeah.
ever. Obviously, you have memories of it. That's where you get your first classic match, and obviously maybe the most iconic moment in all of WrestleMania history, whether the match was great or not, is Hogan slamming Andre. I mean, we all have
Right.
that in our collective memories, right?
And there's I think part of every wrestling fan that maybe wants to think that's WrestleMania 1, but I think that's because you say,
Yeah,
it kind of brings around, you know, WrestleMania for the first couple. They're finding their footing. It's like the early seasons of a really excellent series that kind of takes a while to find its footing, find its audience, find its voice. There's the idea there, but it's just not quite fully formed yet. So you're just going to run with the pilot and kind of hope it finds an audience and build as you go. And I think that's probably what WrestleMania has really been through, what, 38 years
this is
now.
number 38 coming up. And to be
Yeah.
honest, as a kid, you remember the first one because I remember all the hype around Mr. T getting in the ring and rock and wrestling and Cyndi Lauper. And then, of course, 3 was for the longest time the biggest sporting event as far as attendance goes, indoor sporting event in the Silver Dome, and of course the classics that we talked about with the match of Steamboat Savage, and then the big slam heard around the world. But after that, to be honest, they start to jumble a little bit in my mind. Like, you remember moments, you remember matches,
Right.
but I have to look up when each of them took place, because after that, and 38 of them, it's hard to keep straight what happened sometimes on which one. So that's really why we're talking moments and matches and best and worst instead of just overall shows. Doug, I think the best way to do this, let's go back and forth with some good or bad. So I'm going to start with a good,
All
and I'm
right.
come up with good, and it's just the aforementioned Steamboat Savage Classic. That was the first great match in WrestleMania history.
It's one of mine too.
I didn't mean. All right, you go ahead. Give me your perspective on it. Why? What's so great about this match? I won't talk about
Steamboat
it.
Savage, man. I mean, my goodness. I think this is where you see what wrestling can be. This undoubtedly inspired future generations that we are watching today. I,
It
I
holds
have
up.
no doubt that this has inspired, folks that we are seeing on our TVs every Monday, Tuesday, really, Wednesday and Friday, and all those other little sprinklings throughout the week that, everybody is looking to this match going, yeah, that's, people watch that and say, I, I want to do that. Look at these guys go. Look at these guys go.
That was actually the first match I can really recall having so many false finishes. Like, before that, a person would hit their finisher and that'd be the end of the match.
It's over. Yeah.
It's over. I don't remember so many 2.5 counts, which now is just kind of like, if anything, it may even be overdone. But I mean, now it's how you build drama in a match, and that blueprint can be traced back to Steamboat Savage in the way that they constructed their contest there. That generations of matches has followed since. I'll let you go next, then, Doug, since I stole yours. You want to go a bad?
Let
Give
me,
me
let
a
me go
give
with
me a
the, let me
worst.
go with the bad. And this is a more recent one from WrestleMania 33, because when I was doing some research, I was like, because like you say, these start to blend together, and I'm an old man, I'm confused most of the time as is,
You
and it
are,
was helping me to research because again, I can't really get onto Peacock and like to look for things
because you're old.
because I'm old and I'm confused, but fortunately, I have a smartphone that can do things for me. But it was when I was like looking into this, I was reminded of what a stinker of a match, not because of the talent involved, but just the build and just the cheesiness of it. Was that Orton Wyatt match from WrestleMania 33, and just all of, I mean, it just wasn't good. And
It
not
was.
because Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton aren't good; they are excellent talents, both of them. Uh, I it just was not good, man. And then like the weird like imagery that was projected onto the ring, and it was almost a gimmick match, but it shouldn't have been.
Yeah,
It was just bad.
it was bad. The booking of it was bad. The way it was presented was bad. Totally agree. I'm going to go back old school. I kind of
Ooh,
alluded to earlier. Bad that first main event, for all of the hype and for all that it did for the future of pro wrestling by being making WrestleMania a success. You go back and think about the fact that you have a the biggest card of all time. The world title is not defended. The main event is a tag team match involving someone who is not a wrestler, and try to get that to fly these days. And that was your main event for the very first WrestleMania. And I guess for what they needed to do, it was successful. I think we talked about that before, and when we did our special on celebrities and wrestling, and that it was no doubt one of the more successful outings of a celebrity in professional wrestling. But as far as a main event goes, on the biggest card of all time up to that point, it was severely lacking.
I don't even recall that match. It,
It take you 10 minutes to watch. It didn't go long, fortunately. I mean, it didn't need to, but it probably still went longer than anybody wanted to watch. But
and
I was into it.
I completely understand why wrestling has like celebrity interactions and celebrities in there. Yeah, I've got a note in here about some bad WrestleMania moments that involve celebrities other than Bad Bunny.
A
Yeah,
lot, a lot of them do. A lot of these moments on the bad are going to be celebrity moments.
I mean, honestly, I did five good, five bad.
Okay.
Because I figured we could be here all night, riffing on WrestleMania good and bad. So I tried to keep it condensed, but
I have a few more. A few.
when I made my list, I was like, my number five on my five bad ones was any celebrity match ever at WrestleMania,
That
with
kind
the
of covers
exception
a
of
lot.
Bad Bunny, because I, again, I get it. I understand you want to bring in your casual wrestling fans or even fans that aren't wrestling fans, but they want to see Bad Bunny. That's great, man. Give the man a contract. He can multitask. He can tour. He can wrestle. Jericho does. you know, Jericho's not at the level of popularity of Bad Bunny, but there's a dude who can go. Other celebrities, no, I don't want to see Logan Paul or RuPaul or any Pauls in my wrestling ring.
So I don't have this on my list of good, but I will say, and I think we covered it in our celebrity show, the Floyd Mayweather Big Show match was one of the better contests you'll ever see involving a celebrity. But I think because he was a boxer and the way that they booked it to be a big man versus little man, sucker punches to the face, they booked it well to make it seem a little more believable than what they'll end up doing with Logan Paul. But I want to give you a true good here, and this
All
is a
right.
good Wrestling Mania match, and that is brother versus brother. You have Bret versus Owen.
Oh,
That
oh yeah,
match
there you go.
holds up all these years later, and you see two guys actually that planted the seeds in a lot of ways for the Hart Foundation feud and brother versus brother feud, and Owen going ballistic, and then eventually Bret turning heel only in America. I mean, there's so much that can be traced to that moment of which is the better brother, and it was done well, and it was a great match, worth going back and seeing. You?
Wow, I hadn't even thought about that one, but I mean, how do you go wrong with Stu Hart's sons feuding? How do you go wrong with that? I
Yeah,
mean,
those
really?
two. Yeah.
Yeah, Owen and the Hitman. Come on, dude.
Writes itself.
It really does. So let me go good here,
Sure.
and this is more of a moment. The match, not a bad match, but the Daniel Bryan winning at WrestleMania 30. the win, the energy, just the release after it builds up, and that a classic WrestleMania moment that it just resonates with good vibes. The power of positivity right there. You know that classic WrestleMania moment.
So because I think I have more than 5 and 5, I'm gonna group a couple. I'm gonna
That's
do a
cool.
couple bads here. I'm gonna switch to bads because you
Do
gave
it.
me a perfect segue. I'm gonna go a bad Daniel Bryan moment at WrestleMania, and that is Daniel Bryan losing a world championship in 18 seconds to Sheamus.
Oh,
Yes, you made an angle out of it afterwards, but no world title match on the biggest card of the year should end in 18 seconds when fans have paid good money wanting to see a title match.
I had completely forgotten about that.
That was awful.
There's a reason I'd forgotten about that, but I had
It was awful.
completely forgotten about that.
My other bad I'll throw out there just to tick off my list is the entire WrestleMania 2 concept of taking place in 3 cities simultaneously, so that you any one time 2/3 of your live crowd is sitting there watching screens as it's being simulcast. And so one of the cities was lucky enough to get the main event of Mr. T returning to WrestleMania to participate in a boxing match with Roddy Piper.
You
If
know,
all of that wasn't a big bundle of bad for you, just let all of that sink in for a moment, and you'll know why you do not need to try to navigate Peacock, Doug, and find WrestleMania 2.
again, celebrities, unless you're Bad Bunny, don't show up at WrestleMania. Pat McAfee, you can come on in too. You're allowed. Other than you and Bad Bunny, no. Stop it, guys. Just stop it.
Oh, where
You
you want
know,
to go to?
when I think about it, what I remember about the early WrestleManias has nothing to do with wrestling, but I remember as a child watching Mr. T and Hulk Hogan on Saturday Night Live with Billy Crystal's, Fernando's Hideaway or whatever it was. And I remember, I don't, that's all I remember about the early WrestleManias. While I was up, past midnight, when I was like, what, 8, 9 to 10? I don't know. Watching Saturday Night Live, not wrestling, but Saturday Night Live, and trying to figure out why B.A. Baracus was, on my TV.
They were everywhere. I mean, it really was successful and got lots of eyes on the product. There's no doubt about it that first WrestleMania celebrities involvement put wrestling in the mainstream culture, but not so much in ring. But Doug, you want to go good or want me to go good?
Why don't you go good?
So shout out again to the bad guy. I'm going to go for the very first high profile, maybe not the first ladder match, but the first one in WWE history, and probably the first that most wrestling fans saw. Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, absolutely amazing.
On my list.
Well, yeah, I can kind of summarize sort of like you with all celebrities. You could just go ahead and say anything with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania, you put it on your good list. He even managed to have a memorable match from Vince McMahon. Even that whole thing ended up like really good. Like Shawn Michaels is Mr. WrestleMania.
Absolutely. I've said it before. There are wrestlers like Daniel Bryan, Shawn Michaels. You put them in the ring with me, and I'm going to look great in there. But yeah, Razor Ramon and HBK ladder match was on my list too, just because not it's not a sympathy vote there to get the bad guy on my list, but it's a great match and deserves to be on anybody's WrestleMania conversation about great WrestleMania matches.
Since I stole your good one there, I'm going to throw one more good one and then let you go good again. But let's talk Razor one more time. How about the moment, not a match, but it's late career, one of the last big glory moments, I think, for Razor Ramon character, and or Scott Hall, I guess, is what he would have been in this instance. But when you realized at one of these later day WrestleManias, like, oh my gosh, we just have had a run in, and now we have the NWO and DX fighting like that. I'm an old school fan. Yes, these were old men at the time, but come on, we were marking out.
We were totally marking out. Hey, a lot of there's not a lot of love in certain wrestling clicks for the click, but I love DX. I love it. The original NWO, the whole concept there. I was red and black back in the day. Go do your homework if you don't know what I'm talking about, kids. Comment below if you do. But I gotta agree. That was great
It was
too.
a great moment.
That was really great because they're old dudes, but still, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
you
there's
can't.
that nostalgia pop. You couldn't do it better at a WrestleMania than to give them that one last shining moment from a big crowd, and the crowd ate it up.
So let me go with the good, and let's talk
Sure.
about something that happened just last year. Because we're with our is it on your list too? Banks,
Nope.
Banks
No,
and
no, no,
Belair.
no, 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 but it needs to be there. Talk.
Banks and Belair, two amazing talents. We have two women of color main eventing. A passing of the torch, and I usually think passing of the torch in wrestling is the seasoned veteran, which, really Banks is at this point a seasoned veteran. All of the four horsewomen, I think, and not because of age, but because of just time in the business and talent, they're all seasoned veterans, really passing the torch to, the new torchbearer there in Brianna Banks. Not Brianna. Who is Brianna Banks? I'm making up wrestlers now. I think that's Pete Dunne's new name, actually.
Oh, let's not get into that.
But Sasha Banks and Belair, I mean, passing the torch to Belair, and even at the start of the match, just the energy that the two of them have, recognizing what they're doing and knowing what's coming. I mean, these are two great, great talents, and I'm probably overusing that word tonight, but we're talking about WrestleMania, showcase of the Immortals. You're going to get on either one of our lists because you're a great talent or because, well, if you're on the bad list, there's any number of reasons why you can be on the bad list because even there's some great talent on the bad list, like when I start off with Orton and Wyatt. But Banks and Belair, come on. How do you not recognize that?
Absolutely fantastic and historic. Also historic and fantastic. I know I said pretty much anything with Shawn. I do want to call out one more Shawn match, and that's Shawn versus Bret, 60-minute Iron Man match that actually ends up going 65 minutes. I mean, in a time now of short attention spans and trying to get everybody on the card, it's hard to believe that Vince McMahon actually greenlit a WrestleMania contest to go more than an hour, but it more than delivered. Again, look at the men involved.
60-minute Iron Man match that ended without any kind of pinfalls that had to go into overtime.
Overtime, man.
Yes, exactly.
And
That was actually on my list, and I tried to pare my list down. I was like, I want some room for some moments and some room for some just classic matches. And but it was on my list. It's right there. It's marked out because I was like, I need to pare this down, or otherwise we're going to be here all night.
it's probably not a surprise we have so many that would be in common. Give me one of the bad ones off your list.
So I think we caught this at your house when we were much younger. We're taking a trip in the Wayback Machine here to WrestleMania 20. With the original Goldberg Brock Lesnar match.
That's on my list.
Both these dudes are leaving the company. The
Yep.
entire world knew they were leaving the company. Nobody cared. Nobody was behind either one of these guys. These dudes were just going through the motions anyway, and were ready to get out the door. It's a completely different story with Brock now. Goldberg was Goldberg and still is Goldberg. Brock is a completely different beast, pun intended. I mean, he was a beast back then, but he was done with the WWE. Goldberg was done with the WWE, and I think the fans were done with both of them. And it
Or
just,
Stone Cold standing in the middle as the referee. like,
yes, yes.
like it is not knowing really what to do with all this turd of a match. Yeah, it was on my list too. One of the worst matches in WrestleMania history. You could at that point try to win the crowd over by putting on a good contest, but neither man cared at this point enough to even go through them. I think you say go through the motions is probably the best way to put it.
Right.
That is a perfect blueprint of a go through the motions kind of match.
I mean,
It was on my list, but also, so you helped me pare mine down a little bit. So I'm going to go Big Show in a diaper.
Oh my God. That is what I love, and I'm also embarrassed sometimes by wrestling.
You know what I'm talking about. Big Show versus Okibono in a sumo wrestling match or sumo wrestling type simulation.
I know. I mean, hey, let's get a sumo, and you're
That no
big.
one knows, that
It's
no
in
one
your
in this
name,
country
your
will
Big
know.
Show. So let's have a sumo wrestling match.
And that's
People like that, right?
yeah. It's not like Okibono's a star over here. People didn't buy it for Okibono, and I think Vince just wanted to humiliate Paul White, quite honestly. And Vince's sense of humor, let's see the 400, 500 pounder in a diaper. That would be hilarious.
No,
And he probably thought it was.
I'm sure he did.
You,
I am sure that was not on my list.
well, it was kind of when you said everything celebrity. So I
Well,
mean,
that's true.
cover,
That's
right?
true.
Give me a good one.
Good one. Let me see what I got left here. So this is more of a moment too, and this is more recently at WrestleMania 31 when Rollins essentially just steals the title.
Can we agree that that's the best cash in ever for Money in the Bank?
Absolutely. And the victory after he cashes in when he's on that giant ramp, just swinging
Yes.
the belt around because he knows
Yes.
the character knows he has stolen something. He has completely got away with something he should have never been able to get away with, but only did it because he cashed in the money at the bank. That is a great WrestleMania moment too. And again, I think that's more of a moment than a classic match by any measure.
Because the match that happened before it is like one that most people didn't really want to see.
Right.
And so the fact that when you don't really want either guy to win, the guy that ends up walking away with the belt is not even in the original contest, made everybody go home happy and stole the show there at the end with a really cool surprise moment, and by far the best cash in ever for Money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good call out. For me, the Stone Cold versus Rock contest at WrestleMania 17, absolutely one of the best both moments and matches as far as the two biggest stars of the time in probably the biggest feud in the history, you could argue, one of the biggest feuds, at least in the history of professional wrestling. And that was the culmination, really. That was the high watermark of the two most charismatic performers of the 90s in front of a hot crowd on wrestling's biggest night. And they pulled it off with a great, memorable contest to boot. Hot as crowd as you're ever want to hear. I have one more good and a couple of bad. You go which way you want.
I got one more bad on my list. So, this man deserved more in a retirement match than what he got. The I almost said Kurt Cobain. Kurt Cobain has never wrestled. Kurt Angle, Baron Corbin, or Kurt Cobain match, that retirement match. It was, Kurt Angle is a legend, a superior athlete in wrestling and he's an Olympic gold medalist. He won a gold medal with a freaking broken neck.
I've heard this.
And you have Biker Goldberg, which, retire him. I don't even think Corbin had the long hair at this point or was even, doing the matches like he did in NXT when he would come in, completely destroy people and look great doing it. But, I realized quickly as time went on that was more of a Goldberg kind of thing to just get him over. He had the size, he had the strength, he had a good look, and he would go in and destroy opponents when he was in NXT. And I quickly realized that's more of a biker version of Goldberg is what they're going for with him. And for this to be the guy that, retires Angle, I just wasn't feeling it, man.
So I only now have one more on my bad list because Baron Corbin retiring Kurt Angle was also on my list. So now I don't have to go over that. So I'm going to say a little piece of WrestleMania moments that at the time seemed like it'd be one of those things they'd replay for a while that hasn't aged so well. And that is John Cena's engagement to Nikki Bella.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, a real proposal in the middle of the ring against, amongst two of WWE's bigger stars on the male and female side seemed like it would be played for years and years to come. But the way that whole relationship panned out definitely has not aged well.
It
It's
you
just
should know better in a wrestling ring. Don't get married. Don't propose. It just doesn't work out, real or shoot. Apparently,
And if you want proof, folks, you can go back a few weeks ago on Valentine's Day episode when we did a whole story on a main event topic on wrestling weddings and just how they're maybe not the greatest idea.
yeah.
Doug, I got one more good.
Go for it, brother.
Uh, this one's one that's also, well, okay. I actually got two more good.
All
Uh,
right.
Rock Hogan, not for the match, but for the
Icons involved, and just
moment of the two of them staring at each other and then going back and forth as the crowd slowly turned from cheering the more recent superstar to go back into their past and root for the nostalgia pop of the old guy Hogan. And you see Rock, of course, immediately getting what was happening and going full heel to let Hogan
yes,
turn. I
yes,
mean, these were two pros. Again, Hogan was never much of a worker, and I'm certainly not a Hogan fan.
no,
But in this moment and this context, they put on an unbelievable generation versus generation match that gave a moment to professional wrestling fans, as you have the biggest star of the '80s against arguably the biggest star of the '90s, really two of the biggest stars of all time, and it was quite the moment. And then the one that's kind of tainted, my last one is. It's kind of like that Daniel Bryan moment that you said where everybody was just so happy. I'll never forget, and I mean, I literally was choked up. But the scene of Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit hugging at the end of WrestleMania with streamers falling down, both of them holding world titles from where they had come and undersized and under charisma. They're not WWE characters, they're wrestlers. And all of that just seemed like such a victory for the sport of pro wrestling and the little guy and the ones that shouldn't make it, making it in the WWE system. And of course now it's tainted because of the Chris Benoit story. But at the time, that was a fantastic, beautiful WrestleMania moment.
I completely agree and honestly struggled. That one is on my list, and I eventually marked it out just because of the legacy of Benoit at this point. But I'm glad you did bring it up because it was on my list, but I couldn't bring myself to, when I tried to start whittling this down, it didn't make the cut again because of the legacy of Benoit. But that is a truly magical moment, just like the Daniel Bryan moment, especially when Eddie gets in there with him and, they're hugging and the emotion is so raw and so real with these two guys.
Yeah, if we can separate the art from the artist and just look at that night in a vacuum, it
Mhm.
still holds up as a great moment. Doug,
Absolutely.
we're through our list, but I have a couple questions I want to pose to you. The
No.
first being, where do you put on a good or bad side of things, Lesnar ending the Undertaker streak? Is that shock factor a good thing, or the fact that they actually let it happen a bad thing? Obviously, it's debatable.
I didn't like it when it happened. I think I immediately texted you once it happened
Yeah,
because I
because
was
it was
red.
it was truly shocking.
I mean, for that was great. Didn't like it when it happened. Still don't like it because Leslie did not need that win. Somebody younger, somebody who could really use that rub, not Reigns, but somebody, somebody else in that locker room could have really used that to really skyrocket them and put them over. Yeah, it could be argued that the right guy got that, and really we all know that it was Taker's call to who ended the streak, and he let Brock end it. So that says mountains about Taker's faith in Brock and going forward. But still, I still to this day think I don't know who, especially at that time, I don't know who would have been the guy, but I don't think Brock needed it. I think Brock could carry it on his own and would not have lost the Fang losing to Taker that night.
I remember wanting to see Shawn Michaels in that streak, but then after a certain amount of time, even though it kind of took all the, um, I guess, the guesswork out of like, ooh, will he lose? Well, he's never going to lose, and then he did,
And then he
and
did.
it was shocking. And for that aspect of it, it was maybe a good thing, but I think in retrospect, I would have been just as happy had no one ever got that victory over Undertaker.
I
If you
agree.
wanted to just let it go where the man had this aura where he just couldn't be beat on the biggest night of the year, I think that would have been fine. And now, he actually ends up going out with 2 losses at WrestleMania, which is just kind of an odd way to
Right.
end it after building it up for 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what's your favorite WrestleMania match of all time? What do you
Oh
think's the
my
best?
goodness. God, I got to go back to Steamboat Savage, WrestleMania 3. I love that match,
I
man.
can't argue with that one. I mean, I don't think there's a wrong answer with that one.
You can watch that over and over and over. I mean,
I went with Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, the very first contest. That's about as perfect a match, a perfect a build up. The guy who's undefeated at WrestleMania versus Mr. WrestleMania, and
right?
then those 2 men. I mean, what was it? It was Jericho and Triple H that actually decided they were going to main event that night, and it went on after that, and no one cared.
Yeah.
Even it was for the world title. I mean, the crowd was exhausted. It was so good, and you can watch that match 1,000 times and still find something new in it. But that might be my all-time favorite WrestleMania match. I mean, one of the best matches ever. But then again, so Steamboat Savage by far. One of the best matches in Mania and all of wrestling history. Do you have a favorite WrestleMania, Doug? Like an actual favorite one of the
That,
events? I actually
that,
have one.
that a favorite WrestleMania encapsulating the entire WrestleMania, right? I
Yeah.
don't know that I actually do because, like we're talking about earlier, WrestleMania is really, especially in the more modern age, I think maybe it was easier to differentiate, earlier WrestleManias from now, but there's so many that just seem to blend together. I don't know that I actually have a favorite WrestleMania top to bottom.
So
That's a
worst
hard
all
question.
around Manias. Do you have a worse one all around? Or is that sort of the same thing with
I don't think that's fair. That's fair for me to say this WrestleMania was better than this one because there are always going to be these shining stars because it is WrestleMania. So I don't think I could actually call out this was the worst WrestleMania ever. Unless we had Baron Corbin main eventing everything with Kurt Cobain or whatever was nonsense I was talking earlier.
so there was a period there where there was a few pretty bad ones kind of jumbled together. So WrestleMania 11 or 9 would probably be it for me. 11 was the one that was actually headline. Now remember, headline by Bam Bam Bigelow versus Lawrence Taylor. That was the headline match. 9 was the year that JR made his debut on the microphone for WWF, which was actually the only highlight of the show because that's also the one that Vince McMahon decided that he was going to dress everyone in togas, and Hulk Hogan walked away that night, the world champion, despite not being in the main event.
That's the thing Vince likes to do is give his big players,
This
titles
wasn't
that
a
they
great
won't
Seth
even
Rollins
use.
moment like you were talking about. This wasn't that. This was Bret Hart defeating Yokozuna or Yokozuna defeating Bret Hart, and then Hulk Hogan coming out and somehow ending up the world champion, which no one wanted. My favorite all around, obviously you could put 3 in the conversation for best, but 17 in Texas Stadium, 2001, it was really the end of the Attitude Era. After that is when ratings started to slip. WCW went out of business, but that was the culmination of the Monday Night Wars, the Attitude Era, headlined in Texas Stadium by Stone Cold versus Rock, top to bottom. Every match was great. You had other great matches like Undertaker versus Triple H. You had a classic TLC contest between the Hardys, Dudleys, Edge, and Christian. You had Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit. You had Jericho versus Regal, I think, was the opening. Like literally top to bottom, this thing was an embarrassment of riches. But that was to me the best WrestleMania. I would love to see one that's top to bottom that great again. Probably not going to be the case when you have bloated 2-night,
The most stupendous WrestleMania in WrestleMania history.
most stupendous WrestleMania in WrestleMania history. But Doug, I do believe we just did the most stupendous, best and worst wrestling show about WrestleMania in WrestleMania history.
I believe it was indeed epic. I don't know about stupendous, but it definitely epic.
A lot of memories, a lot of moments, a lot of matches, both good and bad, and we'll see what this year gives us as far as good and bad. With that, Doug, you ready to move on to some big finish talk?
I am ready to move on to some big finish talk.
You want the 1, 2, 3 to start with your botch, your performance, or your match?
Let's go with botch, and let me circle back around to Cody.
All right, I got
You know,
botch
I
in
wanted
one
to
too.
talk about this. I wanted to save this to the end to talk about.
Go
Yeah,
for it.
Cody going to WWE. Hey, that's cool, man. You've got to forge your own path. Make the choices that are right for you and your family. Nothing but respect for that. I get that. He's in a position that he's never really been in before, as far as negotiating with the folks up in Stanford. Good for him. Maybe he'll find what he's looking for there. However, if you do not debut Cody Rhodes in Jacksonville 3 weeks before WrestleMania, when you're allegedly, trying to book Seth Rollins versus Cody Rhodes, and you put a show of nonsense on like that, when you've been dropping subtle little hints, for weeks since news actually broke. If you don't debut him in Jacksonville, your the backyard of your competition, not competition, just a t-shirt company, you have completely dropped the ball on this whole thing. And at this point, I'm not even sure that Cody is going to WrestleMania, or that it, my insane theory that it's all a work and he's going to lead an ROH invasion makes more sense at this point.
Eh,
Complete botch. I'm not, as far as I'm seeing it.
I mean, if it really is to happen and they're just holding back, then yes. My thing is that it almost seems like there must be some holdup over money, creative, something why it hasn't happened yet, because you're not getting as much juice out of it as you could if you went ahead and put him on TV. So there's something behind the scenes that maybe we'll be talking about here in a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
news wise, because yeah, they had the perfect opportunity and then it doesn't happen. My
Yeah.
botch, and I can't even believe I'm going to give this a botch, particularly considering the folks involved. But I'm giving this to AEW, and I'm giving it to two women that I love, Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa. It's hard for me to say this about these two women, but when you consider their last contest, that lights out match that they had on Dynamite, that was a legit classic, the best women's hardcore contest I ever saw. Expectations were high for the rematch and the title contest that they were going to be having at Revolution. And then it just sat there. It was they have a chance to redeem themselves because there's a rematch tomorrow night on Dynamite. But the match at Revolution was extremely underwhelming by every measure. Nowhere, not even in the same league as the contest they'd had before. So I don't know if both women were just having an off night, it was the way it was booked, or what. But very underwhelming, and as such, probably my biggest disappointment from all of Revolution. That would be my botch of the week.
All right, all right. I think that's fair, because I haven't seen Revolution. I know that's shocking, being Dynamite Doug, but my yard guy cut my cable line, and Comcast, Xfinity, depending on where you are, totally sucks, because instead of a repairman, they sent me a new cable box, which isn't the issue. So I had to splice things back together myself to make things work. Thanks, Xfinity. So I missed a
I
lot.
explained to the people last week that your internet is actually two cans connected by a cord. Like
Essentially, at
one
this
string.
point, it is. I'm surprised I haven't had issues tonight, because I had to splice the lines back together myself just to make it work again until they actually send somebody. And I don't understand why they thought that, please send me a repairman equaled, okay, here's a little box. But there wasn't a repairman in the box. But anyway, I'm a little salty about that.
It's all right. It gets salty.
But this isn't Doug rants about Xfinity, Comcast, whatever they're called this week.
Let's put you in a positive mood. Let's just talk performer of the week or match of the week. Something positive.
So let me talk. Let's talk about William Regal last week. I know his segment went long, and it may not have been for everybody, but this is William Regal. Tony Khan's going to let this man talk, and I just love the honesty and rawness of that performance. I probably can't even call this a performance, because I think there was a lot of raw emotion in that, a lot of truth in that, although it seems very dark in places when he was going through it. And if this group isn't called, the Gentlemen of Extreme Violence, or something with gentlemen in the title, there's a mark that is truly being missed with this stable. But Regal, Yeah, I can't say enough great things about what Regal did last week in his promo. It really is a formal introduction to hi AEW. I'm William Regal.
And not only shows that it was a mistake for WWE to let him go, it was a mistake for WWE to not have him on the mic more often when they did have him.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Tony Khan is going to be tapping into not just the talent on air, but behind the scenes, that brain of William Regal's, which was on full display in that promo. Good call out. For me, I'm putting as my performer of the week Dolph Ziggler. Who would have thunk it? You talk about throwing a wrench into things. Dolph Ziggler, always a talented guy who maybe wasn't getting quite the push he deserved, his placement on the card. And then he's sent down to NXT for just what I thought was a cup of coffee to just kind of spice things up and maybe, give a different look to the world title scene. Never would I have imagined that he would have walked away with the NXT championship, but lo and behold, your up and comer Braun, we got Braun Breaker down there, thinking he's going to have a long title run, and instead he surprisingly loses it in a three-way match. Now, I would almost guarantee that he's going to win it back WrestleMania weekend in that rematch, but a charismatic performer, a talented performer like Dolph Ziggler, getting a late career shine by holding the NXT championship and getting the main event, one of the cards that will be taking place WrestleMania weekend. Good on Dolph, and happy to see it. He is my performer of the week. Had a great first title defense tonight, holding back the challenge of LA Knight. So it's given him a chance to show what he can do in a way that he doesn't get to do on the main roster too very often.
Ziggler is great. And when we saw him here in Huntington a few weeks ago, I loved how he worked the crowd and went old school heel, right? Just the old bait and switch. And, I really think it's smart marketing bringing Ziggler in to take that belt. Because now you have really something to look forward to, like you're saying, Braun Breaker actually, getting to take that back, and gives people something to talk about and look towards. I'd be really shocked if Ziggler retains, WrestleMania weekend. But I don't think that's the point of this. It's to get some shine and some new eyes on NXT and their bright, sparkly colors, not the black and gold, but
all the colors.
all the colors, right? So cool.
Match of the week, Doug. What'd you see?
Man, see my rant previously in the video where I haven't got a chance to watch a lot of wrestling in the past week. A lot of stuff I've seen. It's been like more Sports Center type viewing for me this week, where I catch bits and pieces on, like other wrestling shows or I'm seeing AEW clips here, WWE clips there. So I'm really not qualified to say this was a good match, this was a bad match, because I haven't really seen a complete show in over a week because of my cable situation. And again, I'm really surprised that I haven't lost any connectivity tonight, but toothpicks and band-aids holding it all together.
When you do go to see Revolution, definitely check out if you only saw one match from Revolution, you have to see CM Punk and his MJF contest. That dog collar match is already a classic. I would put it up there with Valentine and Roddy Piper as one of the best dog collar matches in history. It was exactly as you would want it to be. It was slow, methodical. It built. It was violent. It was stiff. They utilized the gimmick. The gimmick was not an impediment to the match. It enhanced what they were doing. You had a great moment where Wardlow, after the very, very long build-up we all knew eventually would be coming, pretty much came out and cost MJF the contest. It was even a throwback to, by utilizing the ring that MJF. I mean, just every little detail of this match was so well thought out and planned and bloody, and it was not. The expectations were high, and it met them all. So definitely check out MJF versus CM Punk. They tore the house down, and CM Punk probably hasn't had to bleed like that since way before his WWE run, since there was no blood in WWE most of the time he was there. So this probably took him back to his very young days of professional wrestling in ROH.
So I really can't disagree with, anytime you want to give AEW love.
Yeah,
But again, I mentioned how what a big click mark I am. I am a huge CM Punk mark too. I mean, I'm so glad that he is back in wrestling. And the build up to this match has been clinic after clinic in how you go old school and why I think we both love wrestling. I mean, just clinic after clinic. So I can only imagine the delivery here in that match.
it was great. And with that, folks, you have another edition of the Two Bros Wrestling Show, WrestleMania season. But Doug, we're back on this Sunday at a regular time, live here on YouTube, and next day airing on Facebook. But we will be doing our Hall of Fame preview. We'll be looking at the class of 2022, our favorite matches and moments, and what we think about the worthiness of the right now 3 inductees. We might have a few more before that time,
Yeah,
but right now we have 3 inductees we'll be talking about, and we'll be doing it on Sunday. And I hope you join us.
absolutely. Thanks for watching, everybody.
See you Sunday.
Yeah.